Good afternoon, sports fans. Here we are at the Trogcast number 2. I'm Jeff Zink here with Jim Reaker by remote. Jim, I hear you're down in the sunny Florida right now. Is that right?
Orlando, Florida. It's about 80 degrees, partly sunny. Beautiful day today. It's really a beautiful day because the Xavier Musketeers are going to make it to the championship of the Tire Pro Invitational.
We should fine you every time you mention Xavier, but that's okay. We'll go through it. Hey, you didn't miss out. It's about 74 degrees here. Beautiful sunny day in Cincinnati as well. But we're going on to
talk tomorrow.
Yes. Okay. All right, Captain Optimism. Thanks for that. We got the second week here of our Trogcast. Trog, T-R-O-G, two really old guys on sports here. We got week 1 in the books, and it started off with some slam-bang games there, didn't we? I mean, we had the early Armed Forces Classic last week, and we talked about that, and then we had a couple of other games where people played each other, and then we had the State Farm tournament, well, not tournament, but the Classic at Madison Square Garden. So some quick on those. I mean, we both, I
was 1 for 3.
1 for 3? Well, I know
one and 3. I'm sorry. 1 and 3. I'm sorry.
And then, but I thought Michigan State would take Arizona, and they came back in those games. But 2 extremely well played games there in Honolulu. IU stated their presence, and Kansas, of course, then came back the following week and beat number 1 Duke on a last-second shot. So your thoughts on some of the preseason, I still call it preseason because it's not a tournament for me. But,
well, that first night out there in Hawaii almost had a March feel to it. First game was a 2-point game, Michigan State and Arizona, 2 March participants about every year. And then what about that IU-Kentucky game, overtime? And lots of fans out there. That definitely had a March feel to it.
Well, you can't. Yeah, no, it's a great game, and you got to love these teams so early. Another one that we just mentioned briefly, but Purdue took Villanova into overtime as well on their home. And finally lost 7. Purdue came in ranked number 15.
Yeah, that was part of the Big East, Big Ten, Dave Gavitt Challenge. And actually, those are my 2 conferences, so I was kind of looking at that challenge this morning. Actually, there are 8 games to be played in that challenge this year. Not all schools are participating. One of the problems is, of course, there's 14 teams in the Big Ten. There's only 10 in the Big East. But it also, because they just started, it doesn't match up with everybody's schedule. For example, Xavier's not in it this year, even though they're a Big East team, probably because they're down here in this tip-off classic here in Orlando. But right now, the Big East leads the Big Ten 4-3, and there is one more game to be played, and that's St. John's in Minnesota, and I believe that's supposed to be played tonight. So if the Golden Gophers pull that off, that'll make it a 4-4 tie.
Well, I don't know how you feel, but I really like to see teams go at it hard at the beginning of the year. I know right now, for Tom Izzo up in Michigan State is 0-2 for doing it, but he always does that, and he's got another tough game against Duke next weekend. But it lets you know what you've got early. Unfortunately, there were also a couple of upsets last week with Baylor thumping number 4 Oregon, and Creighton doing the same to number 9 Wisconsin.
Yeah. You talk about Michigan State. I was sitting yesterday morning with a man from Detroit who was a Michigan State fan, and he was telling me, I didn't realize, we were talking about the craziness of how these teams travel sometimes. And just to give you an example, they played Arizona out in Hawaii on November 11th, Veterans Day, opening night. They then traveled to New York, and that following Tuesday played UK. Then they were going to return home the 18th. Is that today? So tonight they're playing a home game, And then they're going to travel to the Bahamas and play in the Atlantis Open kickoff tournament down there, 3 games starting November 23rd before they travel to Duke the 29th. That's just a crazy, crazy schedule.
It is crazy, but Tom Izzo does that. Maybe not that crazy on the travel schedule, but every year he likes to see what his kids have got early, and he's got something in that Miles Bridges, and that kid, he just ate up the floor. He seemed a little tired, like we kind of predicted last week when he came to New York for the second game against Kentucky. He's going to be one to watch the rest of the season.
Yeah, him and Josh Jackson of Kansas. We were talking about as Dickie V calls them, the diaper dandies last week. Those two impressed me. And then the other night I did catch UK a little bit, and Malik Monk was the one. He was lighting it up from 3. He was the one of the diaper dandies down there at UK that kind of impressed me.
And, of course, Coach Cal found 77 reasons why they weren't very good. But that's his sort of shtick, too. But that's sort of the early results of the big names. Looking through the rest of them, the changes in the rankings, obviously Indiana moved up, but then Kansas came back and beat Duke. Of course, Duke had 3 of their kids, 3 of their star freshmen not playing that night, so who knows what that's going to be like in March. But other than that, there just wasn't that much, and the only really thing this weekend is Bearcats go to Connecticut to play Rhode Island tomorrow at Mohegan Sun Arena. There's the games that they have.
And Rhode Island, they're ranked, or they're one of the top teams coming out. Yeah, coming out of the Atlantic 10 this year. I saw a very well-coached team play the last 2 days from the Atlantic 10, that being Davidson, of course, of Steph Curry fame. They got beat by
on Missouri today after Xavier had a little bit of difficulty with them last night.
Yeah, and that kind of worried me about the second game after I saw that. But very well coached. They're very fundamental, and I think the Missouri boys were a little hungover from that close defeat yesterday to Xavier.
Yeah, so and we'll talk about our Xavier cast next week. What's going on with the Muskies, because they've struggled a little bit. They've pulled out 3 wins, but they haven't exactly been the number 7 team that they were predicted in the preseason. That brings us to,
go ahead.
No, you were going to say something about Xavier, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, well, I thought this afternoon, I don't know if you watched the game up there, but I believe that they played better. There's a lot of new players. They got 2 new seniors, actually, transfers in the mix, and a couple freshmen that are playing some significant minutes, part of it because Miles Davis and Kaiser Gates are not playing yet, and they were probably projected starters coming out of last season. So I feel like they're starting to gel and come together. It's kind of one of the good things about this early classic down here, this tip-off tournament, that they get to play these 3 games in 4 days and spend some time together. I think it's starting to help them gel.
Well, that brings us to our second topic today that you brought up, which is about these early tournaments. And a lot of them are exempt tournaments or by invitation only, and whether or not this sort of thing prepares teams for March or quick turnarounds. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it does. I mean, again, it's kind of the same atmosphere. You're in a strange city, living out of a hotel, getting ready for an opponent that you really don't know who you have. For example, where I am, they didn't know until yesterday who they were going to play, or late yesterday afternoon who they're going to play today. And now they got 2 days to prepare for their Sunday game. So, yeah, I think it's good for, just the whole atmosphere of living out of a hotel, being together, doing your walkthroughs in hotels and things like that, eating food on the road. So, I think it's a good, when they get to March, they'll think back to this. I was looking. I wasn't quite sure what the rules were, so I checked it out. Right now, NCAA Division I teams are allowed 29 games, but they can play one of these events, which is called an exempt event, which can be up to 4 games. If they play in one of these exempt events, then they're only allowed 27 other games. But, of course, if you play the 4 max out of that exempt event, you could have 31 games on your schedule. the teams, one thing, they can't play or they can't be involved in an event with another team from their conference. Now, they've had some exceptions to that because of all the conference moving of teams in the last few years they've allowed. And they can only participate in the same event every 4 years. But it seems like everybody's doing it these days.
Well, I mean, if last week in Sports Illustrated, they actually did a bracket of brackets, and they sort of judged all these games, whether it was the CBS Sports Classic, which is coming up, versus the which has already been played. Of course, they decided the winner would be the Maui Invitational, which has got Chaminade, Georgetown, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Tennessee, UConn, UNC, and Wisconsin, mainly because, you get to go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of them.
And Xavier's going there in 2 years, so I'm already making my plans to go out there.
I'm sure your wife will be thrilled. But remind your people why you're talking to us from Orlando, Florida, even though it is the I know some tire store is sponsoring it. I forget which one, but it's
Tire Pro invitation.
Tire Pro Puerto Rico tip-off, but it's being in Orlando, Florida. So remind the folks why you're not in San Juan.
Well, that's where the tournament was supposed to be. The traditional, actually, this is the 26th annual, supposed to be Puerto Rican tip-off, but officials decided because of the Zika virus and kind of the uncertainty of all that, about a month to 6 weeks ago, the officials decided to move it here to Orlando, Florida, and so they're playing at the Walt Disney ESPN complex here. Beautiful facility, though.
Yeah, it was nice. I saw the second half there of the Muskies against Clemson. The one negative of these things is that, and you hit on it a little bit, is some of these things have to be booked years in advance, and that's why they're not holding off. Syracuse moving to D.C. and Louisville from the old Big East, but they. One of the problems is they're not so inclusive. Mark Tracy had a great article this week in the New York Times where he said, where's Butler? Where's Gonzaga? Where are these big showcase events? And he pointed out that, for example, the CBS Sports will be next weekend. UK, North Carolina, OSU, UCLA has the same teams every year. They don't grow from that. They basically, the Legends Champions Classic, which we just saw, just an ESPN deal through 2018 for the same four teams. And his one of 1987 to 2013, all of those have had several Final Four appearances, and OSU has won championship. So it's sort of the point of it, and I think we'll talk about this later when we talk about students, and you got to watch your sound there. It sounds like you're breathing into your microphone, and we're picking that up. It's sort of how do the lesser teams end up getting involved in some of these great tournaments?
Yeah. You were cutting out a little bit there, so I wasn't hearing everything you said there. So I'll agree with you.
If only it was that easy in life with you.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right. I switched over from the speaker. Maybe I get. All right, you came back. You talked about, you got the anything really going on in your leagues this week that is notable?
Well, Villanova had a couple close games. Actually, they're playing in a classic in South Carolina, and they only had a 9-point win, which is kind of a small for them against Western Michigan. And, of course, they had the close game with Purdue, but that was at Purdue. Creighton, they beat Iowa in the Big Ten Big East Challenge, so they're off to a good start. And Georgetown's kind of off to a shaky start. In fact, they lost to Arkansas State the other night. Their other loss was to Maryland, which, of course, is, usually pretty strong team now in the Big Ten or the Big 14, however you want to call them. So in the Big Ten, IU, they're excited, of course. And And James Blackman came back, and he really had a big game against Kansas. So the IU faithful are very excited about that. James Blackman, of course, actually James Blackman Jr. Some of you old ones like us might remember James Blackman Sr., who played for UK, I believe, back in the early 80s. He's from Marion, Indiana. But James Blackman got hurt in the middle of last season. He's back now, and so the Hoosier faithful are very excited. And Michigan put a little bit of a thumping on Marquette last night, and so some people think, and actually they say this is the healthiest this Michigan team's been for about 3 years. They've had a lot of injuries that have hurt them in the last couple of years. In the Big 12, Texas off to a 3-0 start. As we talked about, Shaka Smart is probably going to get that program turned around, so watch for them. Got to watch Oklahoma here yesterday. They defeated Tulane, but it wasn't easy, and there's a lot of new cast of characters for the Sooners. Of course, you remember they were in the Final Four last year, and I think
but he also lost a couple big assistants. So. Yeah.
So that's my conferences. How about yours? Anything noteworthy to talk about?
Well, there's not all that much. Like I said, and you know my feeling on anything coming up into the tournament, even pre-Christmas. But, you know, Duke, obviously, in the ACC, they lost on a last-second shot, like we already said, to a good Kansas team that, you know, was started number 3 and then dropped because of the loss of Indiana. And you saw kind of what the ACC is like today. Clemson, who finished 8th last year, and unfortunately didn't get into the tournament based upon their non-conference schedule, because they beat, you know, Louisville, they beat Duke. They had some very strong outings. They took Xavier into the last couple of minutes. So the ACC is going to be interesting to watch as they go through. The SEC, again, not much going on there yet. Well, it'll be a couple of weeks for them to really play their season, which are preseason games, as they walk through it all. Kentucky looked very strong against MSU the other night, and obviously with, like you said, the new set of diaper dandies, one and dones, they're going to be tough. The Pac-10, obviously Oregon, huge loss to Baylor. Who knows where they're going to end up in next week's rankings. And I think that means UCLA and Steve Alford have got to step up, and they're going to be in that CBS Sports Classic with the UK, UNC, and Ohio State a week after next, and that'll be an important game for them to see what's going on. A couple other big things. Go ahead.
I saw one of your Pac-12 teams play yesterday in Arizona State, and I had forgotten they are coached by the legend Bobby Hurley. But they were schooled by Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa, you know, Iowa's kind of like Indiana. Everybody knows how to play basketball. And they were a lot more fundamentally sound and really schooled the Sun Devils. Yeah. So I think Bobby's got a lot of work to do with them out there.
Well, as we always know, you know, and we talked about this before, when a good coach leaves, there's a carryover for the next couple of years that the coach coming in gets. But when they end up having to fire a coach that hasn't been successful, it takes the new coach a few years to get his people in place, and that's what it's going to take. I look at something like even the University of Miami, Ohio football team, which has been bad for years and years, and they hired the defensive coordinator out of Notre Dame, and now they've reeled off 5 or 6 in a row in his third year, so it takes time. One other thing to note is obviously UConn is in a mess. You talk about somebody took over a strong team. You know, Coach Ali wins a NCAA championship in his first year, but he's lost 2 games. I mean, went to Wagner and to Northeastern.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on there that leaves Cincinnati as the top-ranked team in the American, but I don't think that's a conference that's going to have all that much to do with. And some of the people we talked about last night, unfortunately, Marvin Menzies didn't get off to such a great start at UNLV. They lost their home opener to South Alabama by 8. And unfortunately, your Mastodons, they're 1-2.
I saw that, and they're actually going to play the Hoosiers in about a week or so that'll be interesting. I might have to change that pick, but I'm not giving up on them yet.
No, yeah, it's one of the best nicknames in sports. And one of their losses is to Arkansas.
They're Arkansas and then Illinois State, which usually has a pretty tough program. And again, sometimes I think those mid-majors, it takes them a little bit longer to find their game. And they start playing again at their own level, and then they start to improve by tournament time. So I'm not giving up on the Mastodons yet.
Well, you don't worry about those picks until the end. Rick Stansbury and the Hilltoppers, Western Kentucky, 2-0, and watch out for them.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Well, it's the first week. It's the first week. I mean, you know how I feel too. Talk to me in February about where they are. You've got, don't worry, that's not a pizza delivery or anything, just the phone going off. One of the things that you brought up, and I think is something to consider, is especially with the huge number of diaper dandies, freshmen, year of the freshmen, the one-and-dones, as they've come to be known, is, can we still call them student athletes, or has college basketball just become a money-making tool? Go off on that, Jim, as to what you're thinking and why you thought that was something we should discuss here in November.
Well, again, with all these, it just kind of struck me as I'm looking at all these tournaments in the schedule, and again, looking at Michigan State, how much they are going to travel in like a 3-week period, how much education is really going on with these students. But after I've been down here, I've kind of got a different side of it and have a couple different thoughts. I mean, most of these Division I players, their first professional goal in life is to be a professional basketball player. And so I kind of think, that I kind of put it in this regard. They're kind of like entertainers, like anybody that goes to school to be a musician or in the theater. And so this is their performance. And very interesting, the resort I'm staying at, actually the Northern Iowa team is also staying there, but there's also a bunch of soccer players from the lower divisions. There must be a tournament going on in town here. And I walked into the resort lobby today, and it was like a study hall. They all had their computers, all these athletes sitting around with their computers, obviously working on schoolwork. And, I guess the world has changed. You can get an education. You don't have to be on campus as you did back when we went to school. And the other thing is I think these athletes are probably learning a lot of valuable lessons in life as they travel to all these different places. I'm sure a lot of these coaches try to have experiences off the court or off the field for them as they go to different places like Hawaii, down here in Florida. And so I'd say, yeah, they are student athletes. Again, money's a big part of it. Money makes the world go round. Money makes those universities hum a little bit. But so that's kind of, I kind of changed my thought about that as I was down here.
Well, and I can see your point. I think it's a mix of the two. I think the unfortunate thing is that the focus comes on these one-and-dones. I mentioned to you last week, and if you get a chance to watch it, Showtime just had a documentary on Ben Simmons called One and Done. Of course, Ben Simmons from LSU, who became the number one pick in the draft by the Philadelphia 76ers. And the whole focus of that documentary is that he just wanted to play ball, and he had to go to school, and he didn't like it. Why wouldn't they let him go? Like a musician, his mom compared it to somebody who wanted to try out for a Philharmonic. If they pass the audition and they get accepted, why can't they just go straight into it? But I'm with you. I think too much. Go ahead.
I would kind of agree with you. I think the one and done probably should be done away with. If you think you can make the professional level coming out of high school, go for it. There's been a few that have been very successful. LeBron James, of course, comes to mind. Kobe Bryant. I think maybe Kevin Garnett. I don't know if he ever went to college.
No, he did not. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it's just, at 18 years old, you make that decision. And if you try to make the professional ranks and you don't, maybe then you decide I need to go to school and work on my game. Or, the other thing is hopefully these athletes are getting some training in something else, because we know that they're not going to play basketball or football or whatever their sport is to make a living for the rest of their lives. Of course, if they do very, very well, as few do, they could set themselves up for life. But so that's kind of my thoughts on the whole.
And I hear you. I mean, you got to remember there's 351 Division I NCAA men's programs out there, and they get 13 scholarships for college. So that's over 4,500 athletes that are getting, if they got a full scholarship, and sometimes they divide them up into half or quarter scholarships in some of these smaller programs. But that's over 4,500 young people, young men in this case, and some of the JUCOs get 15. So I think my problem with it is it gets focused on the big names. So you hear about Ben Simmons and the Diaper Dandies and the One and Dones and Coach Cal, but most of the folks that are going to school are going to school. You hear about Ben Simmons, and one of the things they pointed out in this documentary is, he knew he needed a 1.8 GPA to be eligible. That's basically what he got. In his second semester, he didn't want to go to school, and when he got caught skipping classes, and this is where I think it's on part of the universities too. His entire punishment for missing classes was to not start one game. He missed 4 minutes and 30 seconds of one game as a punishment for not going to class. And so it's got to be held both ways. There's a good book out there called by Jonathan Abrams called Boys Among Men that details the 10 years before they went to the new rule where you had to play, until you're 19, I think it is, to your 19th birthday. And like you say, he mentioned successes like Kevin Garnett and Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. And he also said there were workman-like people like Sean Livingston, who didn't start off well, but then became a great one. He focuses on a guy named Corleone Young, who was picked 40th, second round by Detroit, and spent a total of 15 minutes on an NBA court. But what people forget, too, is, Corleone played 8 years professionally. The NBA isn't the only place that you can make your living. And, they also bring up Kwame Brown a lot, and I was kind of shocked in looking at the citizens. Kwame Brown known as one of the biggest busts in NBA history, but the guy played 13 seasons and made over $64 million. So that's a bust.
I'd like to be that. I'd like to be that bust.
It's a bust I'd like to be. One of the people I thought about, and you probably remember, is a guy like Dontonio Wingfield, who played for UC and went early, and Coach Huggins tried to talk him out of it, and only played 3 years, and then his professional career was over. So you're right. Some of these people can handle it or not, but I also bring that up to talk about what Coach Hugs always said was, you've got to remember, a lot of these guys would have never gone to college anyway.
That's a very good point.
For basketball. So what I'd like to see is some sort of way for them to be able to be connected with their university or come back. If things don't work out, they can still get that academic scholarship of somewhere. They don't have their athletic eligibility, but some way for the school, which is making money off of them, do it. You've got athletes like, Allison Lee, who's on the LPGA tour and is going to UCLA full time and getting her degree. And Sports Illustrated also just had an article about the football players who are graduating early. Now, one of the advantages they have is that they can enter the university a semester early, and that's what a lot of the top-notch guys do. Is they come that first spring so they can get classes under their belt. Obviously, you can't do that in basketball, but that would be a great thing. And too, the sad side of it is, one of your favorite documentaries, I know it's the Fab Five.
Yeah.
And one of the saddest scenes in that is, Mitch Albom telling Chris Webber that he can't buy him a pizza because he knows it's against NCAA regulations. He doesn't want to get him in trouble while they're standing outside a sportswear shop where Chris Webber Michigan jerseys are being sold for $75.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I don't know what the answer is, but it's got to be, if they leave and they choose to leave, because one of the things about Kwame Brown is, and it's in this book, is that he had a huge discussion with Billy Donovan. He had committed to Florida, and he wanted to go to college. He knew he wasn't really ready, but his family needed the money.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you tell a kid like that, don't take care of your family.
Right.
So my point is that most of the process, like you're seeing, they are being taken well good care of. But there's still something that those top kids, like the Ben Simmons and the Coach Cal revolving door, they get all of the focus rather than the kid from the Atlantic Sun Conference. And I say that because that conference has almost 72% of their playing minutes returning, which means those are kids that are coming back to play over and over again and are going to get their degree. People aren't mentioning those kids that get the degrees and come out and become the lawyers and the teachers and that stuff. So I don't think the system is broken, but I think it does need an adjustment.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, one thing I'd like to, before we close here, is just talk about these exempt tournaments. This is my first experience, and if you are a basketball junkie, this is the place to be. Because everybody here is a basketball junkie. I had a very interesting yesterday afternoon. In the morning, I sat over on the side where most of the fans were sitting, but yesterday afternoon, I went back in and sat back over on the other side where there weren't many fans, and sat down next to a guy who had a Villanova T-shirt on. Well, some Xavier fans started harassing him, and for a while, but I started talking to him, but we sat there like we were best friends. He told me about going to the Final Four last year, how he had traveled down to Houston to see that. He was he was a Villanova grad, a longtime fan. He actually lives down here now, but he follows them all over the place. And but almost everybody you talk to, besides the players, actually, interesting enough, yesterday I sit by Tariq Jones' mother, and today I sat by J.P. McCure's mother. So and I sat in this fourth row yesterday, and the second row right behind the Xavier bench. So you get to hear what's going on the bench. You get to hear the coach making the calls and the players and things, their conversations in between each other. So it's a really neat experience. I've really enjoyed it down there. So if you're a basketball junkie, you ever get the chance to go to one of these, and usually they're in nice locations where it's nice and warm, I would say go for it. And actually very affordable. For $110, I get to see 12 games down here.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So, yeah. It's,
and get to see your Muskies. Ooh, you'll be glad to know. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just to say, this is part of the craziness we were just talking about. ESPN already has its bracketology up, predicting the brackets for March. Xavier is a 3 seed, okay, and the folks down at Texas Arlington will be glad to hear they're in as a 15th seed.
Well, I also saw that they project where they're going to play, and I believe it had Xavier playing in Milwaukee. Yeah. So, I thought that would work for me. So
those of you who don't know, Jim has a son in Milwaukee, another in St. Louis, and if you're one of those folks that sees him at one of these tournaments, there aren't strangers to Jim. There's just friends he hasn't met yet.
There we go. And again, you sit down at one of these things, and again, you know who the basketball, they're the old man sitting there like you and me, and sits there the whole day. Some people come and see their team and they leave, but no, it's been a fun time.
I'm glad you're enjoying it, and you got 2 more days of it, so that's fantastic. And then we'll have you back here for next week's Trogcast. Any end notes for you? Any fun facts, trivial tidbits?
I got a trivia question for you, but again, we might want to talk about if there are other Xavier fans out there listening about Jeff and I have been asked by Mike Goodpastor to actually start a podcast on just the Muskies. So when I get back in town, we'll probably have to have a production meeting, but we'll probably try to get that one done maybe by the middle of next week. So it'll be on the same website, the Grueling Truth Network. So make a plug for that. I do have a trivia question for you, though.
Okay, and just so people know, that Jim's idea of a production meeting is 2 old guys talking sports over a cold beverage. So we'll work on that. The trivia question, shoot.
And this was, who was the last team to defeat the national champions from last year?
The last team to defeat Villanova is what you're talking about. Last year's, actually, this year's, not this season's, but this year. So 2016, I would have to say that would be the Xavier Musketeers.
You are correct.
Yes, because I was actually in the car on the way to a Reds Hall of Fame chapter meeting with Seg Dennison when they were about to play that game, and Seg said, "You heard it here first. Xavier will beat Villanova." Villanova, I believe, was ranked number 1 at that time, were they not?
Yeah, they were. So, and the Villanova fan I spent the evening with last night watching games, he was so complimentary of the Musketeers. He just went on, and he said, he goes, the reason they won that game yesterday, which was a game that went into overtime, and then kind of a quirky foul there at the end gave the Musketeers one free throw, actually 2. They missed the first one to win it by 1 point. He says, but you know why? He said, he looked at me, he says, you know why Xavier won that game? He says, because they are tougher, because Big East teams are tougher. So he was very complimentary. In fact, he said, I'm going to tell you this, Xavier will make it to the Final Four one day. So that's coming from a Villanova fan. So,
and that's what you hope. You know, Jay Wright got him through last year. Now it's Xavier's turn. But Coach Mack's going to have to work on those free throws. We saw it today, too.
Yeah, heard him today a little bit. So
here's a few fun facts for November 18th for our sports fans of all varieties. Today, in 1865, the Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County by Mark Twain was published. So, Mark.
Actually, I have been to Calaveras County in California.
Mm-hmm.
And they have frogs painted on everything.
And you'll like this one, too, because I know you're a fan, but on this date in 1983, the movie A Christmas Story opened for the very first time. So get your Red Ryder BB gun, but don't shoot your eye out.
Okay.
Now here's one that most people will be amazed by, but 1956, we would still be 4 days away from the opening of the Summer Olympics, which were held in Melbourne in the Southern Hemisphere for the first time. It's a U.S.-led squad
summer down there.
You got it. Now in Sydney, they got it right. They did it in September when they finally got to Sydney. But the U.S.-led squad took the gold medal there, led by Bill Russell, the University of San Francisco. And something that I've always found fascinating is Bill Russell was at McClemmons High School in Oakland at the same time that Reds greats Frank Robinson, Vada Pinson were there, as well as Kurt Flood, who was once in the Reds system but then traded away. So quite a list of athletes there at McClemmons High in Oakland.
Wow.
Well, we will be on the air sometime next week. We have to work around Jim's return schedule and our Xavier cast and the Thanksgiving holiday, but we appreciate you all tuning in. And until the next time, any final words, Trog 1?
Go Muskies.
Muskies always. So this is Trog 1 and Trog 2, and Trog cast number 2 is in the books, and we'll see you next week.
We're out.